Good.
So here we go. Welcome, everybody, to Edge of the Rabbit Hole. We have a fantastic show coming up for you tonight. Mark Fiorentino rejoins us. Coming up next. Welcome, everybody, to Edge of the Rabbit Hole. I'm author and ghost historian Mike Ricksecker. With me, as always, is my co-hostess, Victoria Munday. And down in the chat room, well, we're still looking for a new chat moderator, but Nicole Guillaume from Guiding Echoes is handling those duties this evening. It's not going to be every week, so I need one of you guys to step up and volunteer there. So, and just to let everybody know a couple things. One, super chats have returned. It's been a little over a year, but they are back, so you can make use of the super chat option. The other thing, our good friend Tim Shone passed away earlier today. We're going to address all of that at the end of the show after we talk with Mark. But for now, we have a special guest this evening. Mark Fiorentino rejoins us. We had him on the show back in September talking about the unified field theory, super relativity. Talked about his book, Master of Reality, which is absolutely fascinating. We both have copies. So, Mark, welcome back to the show.
Thank you guys for having me back. Looking forward to having a good discussion tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know Victoria has a lot of questions, but
good.
You have some. You have some at least. So you're talking about that a moment ago. But
I'm
Mark,
Southern and I read slowly. So.
Oh, okay. Mark, just to remind everybody, just very briefly, unified field theory and just kind of a brief. How can this be brief? This is thick, but just a quick overview of your work in the topic that we're going to be going into this evening.
Sure. It all started when I was 10 years old, getting acquainted with Albert Einstein due to a catechism assignment, and fell in love with Albert Einstein and the theory of the unified field theory. So over the years, it got me interested in science in general, into UFOs, and started trying to make a connection to anti-gravity and gravity. So I studied gravity in order to figure out how anti-gravity works. And that really makes sense. He who understands gravity first will be the first person to understand anti-gravity. Once you know how one works, then you know how the other one works. So, and basically Einstein was really working on a problem for the last part of his life, the unified field theory problem, which basically is, simply stated, electromagnetism and gravity emerge as aspects of a single fundamental field. So much of the book, I establish what that single fundamental field is. And once I reprove the existence of the ether, then we move forward and come up with the whole theory of super relativity.
It's an absolutely fascinating topic, and it really gets into the inner workings of our universe, which are some of the things I really want to get into this evening. And I usually start rolling right off the bat with a bunch of questions, but I want to throw it to Victoria first, because usually, we get about halfway through the show, it's like, Victoria, I'm sorry. I know you have questions, so I'm going to let you start it off, Victoria.
Okay, first of all, happy early birthday. I know your birthday's coming up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. When you celebrate your birthday, do you celebrate Einstein's too?
I hardly celebrate mine, but
no, you need to. No, always celebrate your birthday.
Yeah, I think of Einstein a lot. I don't, it's hard to explain this fascination I have with him, but I do greatly admire him. And yeah, since I know we have the same birthday, of course, the thought pops up in my mind. Yeah, he was born, and I remember living in New Jersey, right near where he lived, and actually came into life just before he left. So we kind of missed just by a few days, really.
Aw.
But yeah, I definitely think about him a lot.
Okay, this is a weird question. I just thought of it when you mentioned New Jersey. Did you ever see the old movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still?
I love that movie.
Was
That's
that
a great movie.
Einstein when the spaceman, I forget his name, goes into the was he in a home or
I think it was
something?
Klaatu or something.
Klaatu was the Klaatu, not
The robot?
Klaatu. Yeah, that's the robot. Whatever the spaceman's name was. He went into a scientist's home or something, and he was like erasing the board. Was that supposed to be Einstein?
I
Einstein
might
like?
have been. I don't know. They certainly modeled the character after him. It looked like to me, but I haven't read that anywhere, so I don't know. I would just be guessing, but probably.
Okay, well, that just popped in my mind when you said that. Anyway.
Yeah, I would say it probably is modeled after him.
Have you found your Max Planck yet?
Oh, that's starting to get around.
Yeah, I remember that from last show. Yeah.
Have you found him?
Actually, maybe.
Okay.
Well, I'm trying to meet people, especially physicists. And doing shows like this helps very much. We're making friends and so forth. And I have met a physicist who is willing to review. I'm writing a paper right now. I'm trying to go the route that classical scientists do by writing an actual paper, which is challenging because I'm not a physicist, but I have to speak their language. So there's going to be some math in it. And I've hired a physicist to train me on specifically what the model is. I'm getting I know the model and I know what math I should use. So I'm learning how to use that math and put all that math into a program, which then is going to test my theory, and that will go into the paper with the results. So yeah, I'm working toward that. All of this takes effort. Writing the book was one thing. That's just not going to get it. That's not enough. I can't just write the book and leave it. I'm going to have to do this part with you guys, and we're on the adventure together.
That's exciting.
Each time we go on a show, this is an adventure, and we're going to somehow together hopefully make this happen. So yeah, almost have somebody lined up, and I'm looking to do science shows as well, and get into that mainstream and get them thinking about this theory.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I've been carrying the book. I've been trying to catch up. So I've been carrying it at work with me, and everyone's like, "What are you reading?" I'm like, "Oh, quantum physics. I can just."
So it's a little light reading.
Yeah,
it's extremely interesting, though. Yeah.
Oh, it is. I have a question about the Lorentz model of ether.
Okay, that's good.
Okay. I am no Einstein, but I do remember science in second and third grade, and we learned that the ether did exist. Did something change? Because
really?
Yeah, and I just went to public school.
I'm surprised to hear that, because if you go on to a physics website or a physics forum or whatever, and you talk about the ether, they'll actually get angry if you try to tell them that it exists, and because they're certain, because of one experiment that failed to detect the ether, which I talk about in the book. I explain why it failed, and it didn't really disprove the ether, but a misinterpretation was triggered by that. But I'm surprised to hear that somebody said that the ether, because it does.
This was back in 1970, so back then, and, so I didn't know, maybe the science had changed, and they said, well, we're not going to.
Wait a second. What was that, Victoria, like 1994?
Yes. Time does not exist. Oh, my daughter asked a really good, interesting question today. I'll have to ask you. Okay, but you said, and I'm reading my notes now, when waves move through the ether or the medium, the particles move, but the ether remains at rest. So my question is, if you were to shoot a particle beam or something through the ether, would the inertia of the particle beam being accelerated, would that stay the same, or does that decrease like it would here on Earth?
Inertia is part of the process that creates gravity. In the book, I link inertia, gravity, and mass as really all coming from the same thing. So when a particle moves within the ether, let's say a particle with mass, let's say a proton,
Okay.
a proton particle beam. So we're going to shoot that through space. What moves is the configuration we call the proton, and it's a field. So the particle itself is an ultra tiny field composed of 3 quarks that are moving in a trefoil pattern. Those things generate the mass by their accelerated motion. So the rest mass, the so-called rest mass, not really rest because they're in motion and the whole system works based on accelerated motion. So then when you shoot that one particle into space, it's got that rest mass. It's really an inertial mass that's being generated. And so now you have 2 motions. You have the motions of the trefoil pattern that is the proton. Now you're shoving it into space at near the speed of light. So, you know, the whole thing really flattens out as it gets toward the speed of light. Its mass increases because you're moving in a high velocity in a specific direction. So it adds, in addition to the mass that it has that's generated by those particles. Probably more of an explanation than you wanted, but it gets a little complicated because you've got really 2 frames of reference of motion that are happening at the same time, and they interplay to create the full amount of mass of that particle. So that's a tricky question.
So in theory, would the particle just keep going until it ran into something? Would it ever run out?
Due to Newton's laws, something in motion will stay in motion unless acted upon by an external force. You put that particle beam in motion when you fired it out of whatever accelerator that you used, and it'll stay in motion at near the speed of light until something slows it down.
Okay, so the ether is really, it's not solid. I think you called it quasi-elastic.
It's a quasi-elastic. It's almost not there, but it has tension. It has a lot of properties.
So it's like Jell-O.
It's like very thin Jell-O. It's really hard to describe something that's invisible. The universe is a black box, so what we're talking about is kind of things that are going on in my head or Einstein's head or some physicist envisions, you know, you're trying to do is envision it. And that's good. That's what everybody should be trying to do. And, you know, the English language is not so hot for things in this area. And, you know, I could use a lot of big words and it would get even worse. The understanding would go down because then I have to explain every word I'm using, like
so
quasi-elastic solid.
Well, I got that. So.
Yeah. Well, it means what it means is the ether is an elastic, and it has tensions and stresses within it, little movements that form a field. So fields of force are bendings of the ether, different types of deformations or bending of that space. So particles are special in that they don't. What's the word? They're persistent. They don't unravel. They're inversions of space. So it's as you can see in the book, it gets a little technical, but I have to take the time, piece by piece, layer by layer, and explain it. And once you see that and you get it, it makes so much sense. You wind up saying, how did we not know this already? All of this makes so much sense.
It does. And I really appreciate the parts you underline. Because
I did that deliberately. Whenever I underline or bold, I want you to read it 3 times.
I do. And I sit there and I think, and that's why it's taking me forever to read the book, but I'm getting so much out of this. So.
Yeah. You know, I did that deliberately. I says, this is important. Whenever I underline and bold something, that's like, divine words.
Pay attention.
High importance.
So you said one time, or somewhere in the book I read, randomness is not random, it's pseudo-random. What did you mean by that?
Well, it's chaos. Chaos.
Oh, well.
Things are, the universe is the machine. The machine works. See, when I think of the universe, I don't think of it as random things flashing and moving and whatever. I think of it as a gigantic machine, maybe like a ballet going on in my mind. I see particles dancing and spinning and bouncing off each other. It's all cause and effect. There's no accidents. It's determination. But it's so complex, and the sheer raw number of things happening all at the same time all over, it's impossible to calculate that for the ordinary people, because there's so many. Even the roll of a dice, which you would think is random, is only random because of the way we throw the dice. We do it in a random fashion. We don't always throw it the same angle. The die isn't always up in the same position. If we made a machine to roll dice, and we loaded it in, and the one would be always on the top, and would shove it at a specific angle with a specific force, and it was weighted properly and everything, we would be able to predict the number almost every time of that roll. And that's because you're controlling, non-randomizing the event that causes the roll of the dice. So the universe is the same way. And, I'm going to have a lot of arguments in the future, I'm sure, with quantum mechanics people, because they're going to tell you it's all random. So,
well, what if you were like loading the dice, like you said, and then there was like a piece of dirt or something on the table, or a gush of wind? Wouldn't that change? Is that part of the chaos theory?
It's all part of the process, the machine work. There are no accidents in this, and everything that happens that affects the roll, as it's the air currents, a fluctuation in the gravitational field, somebody walking by, a vibration on the table, the surface of the table, all these things play, the angle it hits, if it has any spin. It gets very complicated to calculate that, because you have to account for all that stuff.
Right.
If
you need all those variables.
And Newton said, if you did all that, you could predict the future of an event like that.
Interesting. Okay. So I have another. On page 60, I'm going to go through them all real quick. On page 60, and I'm going to read this to make sure.
Go for it.
So good. Full knowledge of the universe can only be realized and accomplished by achieving total consciousness. So that makes me think of the 1960s that I've read of in history classes, because I wasn't born yet. How people used to say they would tune in and turn on, or was it the other way around?
Something like that, yeah.
Turn in and tune in, or something.
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about? Once you go in and you understand how everything fits together?
Well, there's two ways you can do that. Through meditation, you can get really close. You can go out of body and so forth, or whatever, and you die. The minute you die, you reconnect to the consciousness, the God consciousness. And you'll notice over there, if you talk to mediums or whatever, they speak like we. It's almost like in Star Trek, the Borg, the mind, the total,
right. The collective,
kind of the same thing. They're all connected. We're connected too, but when we're in the flesh, we're kind of broken off a bit, because we're inside our bodies with a limited system, and our souls are throttled down because we're in this physical body, so we can't fully connect to the other side, like a medium or a psychic or advanced races like aliens have much greater connection to the universe than we do. And as we evolve, we will have more and more of a connection. So yeah, you want to try to connect to the source. Mm-hmm. The source has all the answers, all of the knowledge.
That's the way. Yeah. Like when I was in college, we're saying like when you can't go out, you go in. So you learn to go inside, and you do that. You connect and you meditate and you explore the realms and other theories and out of body travel and all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah, you've got to quiet the mind.
Yeah. So
learn
awesome.
to listen. it's a matter of learning to listen, quieting the mind, and then the impressions and the connection will start to form. And the better you can do that, the the better the connection and the better the information you'll get, whatever you're seeking. What was that famous psychic, the one that predicted the Atlantis would rise? I can never think of his name. He's famous.
Nostradamus? No.
No, after him. He has a place in Virginia where they.
Edgar Casey.
Edgar Casey, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, he used to go into a trance. He used to cheat. It was very clever. Aww. He would actually go to the thing called the Book of Life. If he wanted to learn a future event or something, it's already written in the Book of Life on the other side, and people go and read that book when you're there or you've passed away. You can read about the past, the present, the future. It's all there already engraved in the book. It's a marvelous thing, the universe. We only know just a little bit about it in this physical plane. Even in this galaxy, I'm sure there's millions of other life forms, many of them much more advanced than us. We have yet to encounter them because, let's face it, our government is keeping all of that secret from us right now.
That's my
yeah, and honestly, I think that we have already interacted with them, but they are trying to keep it a secret from us now with these little inklings of disclosure along the way. But
yes, very excited to hear.
Yeah, absolutely, and a little bit getting released here and a little bit getting released there. They're kind of slowly amping us up to finally telling us, okay, they exist. Well, most of us know, well, they have been here, and certainly you think about how old the universe is, almost 14 billion years old. The Earth has only been around 4.5 billion years. So there's been a lot of time there for other, civilizations to rise up in other galaxies, and long before we even were twinkling in the universe's eyes. But so let me ask you, Mark, because there's a lot of fascinating things here in a lot of different directions that we could go with this, and certainly, other life forms, other worlds is certainly one. But to get to those locations, all these fascinating things that you're talking about in here, how do we use what you're talking about here in Master of Relativity, or Master of Reality, I'm sorry, to get to those locations? Are we talking about using this knowledge to open up portals or wormholes to go to these places?
Well, I say both. I don't really know much about the portal technology. I just speculate about that in one of the last chapters of the book. But the way I'm sure that aliens use is they use the slip wave. And what the slip wave does, it's a field. It's a force field. It's created by using an intense magnetic field in a gradient form, so that you form a pressure wave. But that magnetic field also has an effect on the metric of space, and that means it affects the space, the physical space in the area of the spaceship, by pulling it apart, stretching it, thinning it out, which then affects permittivity and permeability. And if you make those two properties of space drop, you can go any speed that you want to. So if you want to go 50,000 times the speed of light, you use the slip wave, you surround your ship with this high intensity magnetic field. Inside of the ship, you have a shielding system. Fortunately, magnetic fields can be shielded. So that protects the inhabitants of the ship from the magnetic field, which is incredibly strong. But it does not shield from the anti-gravity field. Gravity and anti-gravity really can't be shielded with any sort of metal or anything of that nature. So that allows the slip field to completely surround and penetrate everything in the ship and just slightly outside of the ship. you're inside of a bubble that has an extremely thin space. The density of the space in that area becomes very thin, much thinner than normal, and the tension of space increases. All of these things will contribute the ability of that ship to be able to go way beyond light speed. And really, you have to do that. You can't just go light speed. It's not good enough. It'll take 4.2 years to get to Proxima Centauri. That's intolerable. Who's going to want to sit in space for 4.2 years sitting there waiting to get to Proxima Centauri?
Yeah, that's a long trip. You have to take a lot of snacks there. And let me ask you this, because I think it's something a lot of people don't think about when we talk about traveling the speed of light. Because we see like Star Wars and Star Trek and all that, and they have that technology to do that. But how is the human body affected by that? Could the body withstand the force, or do we have to develop something, for our bodies to make that kind of trip? Because I would imagine that's a lot of force on the body.
See, that's a really good question. And I attend the anti-gravity seminars, the American Anti-Gravity Group, and they talk about something called inertial leakage. It's lethal. If that field wasn't complete around that ship, you would have inertial leakage, and going at just the speed of light, you're dead in an instant. So that field has to be completely surrounding everything. And so you not only get the benefits of moving fast, but all of the Lorentz transformations are canceled out. So there's not an increase in mass of your ship as you approach and go beyond the speed of light. And you can go beyond the speed of light. And there's no inertia. So as you're moving at 50,000 times the speed of light, you're just simply floating in there like you're weightless. So you have no inertial effect. And that's perfect. That's just what's needed. But as I researched the slip wave and its properties and how it worked, I found that it did everything necessary for life forms to be able to travel beyond the speed of light, which is a necessary thing if you're going to survive until the end of the universal cycle, because you'll have to leave your planet sooner or later and colonize somewhere else. That's what all these other guys are doing. I got news for you.
Well, yeah, at some point we're going to have to, get off the planet, and people talk about overpopulation and all that, which, is happening. But at some point, the sun is going to envelop the earth and we're all going to be gone. So if we want to survive the species, we do have to go elsewhere. So yes, it's certainly something we have to develop.
So you wouldn't have to, I'm sorry. Would you have to be in some sort of stasis, or you can walk around and move around and live your life?
No, it's like you're in outer space, like Apollo did. They're going maybe 17, 18, 19,000 miles an hour toward the moon. That's so slow compared to the speed of light. It's not a big deal, but they're floating in there like there's nothing. And they're going at a steady rate of speed, so there's no acceleration. When you don't accelerate, you don't have the inertial problem at slower speeds. If we get in jets, which I consider slow speeds compared to the speed of light,
right?
And you make a sharp turn, you're going to feel inertial forces and gravity. If you make it too sharp a turn, you're going to get sick, pass out, or worse. Mm-hmm. And if you were to go at the speed of light, and physicists would argue with me about this, but I'm sure that I got this right. If you were to go 99% the speed of light, if you had a magical rocket that could do that, you wouldn't be able to move. You would be crushed into the back of your seat, even if you weren't accelerating anymore, because you're all the atoms in your body would be interacting with space at this point, and they wouldn't be able, the quarks and everything, be able to move properly. Your clock would slow down and stop. You'd be crushed. You couldn't even move your hand forward to touch the controls. That extra velocity would take so much energy because your mass increase would be so big that you couldn't function. all of these problems are fixed with the slip wave spatial bias field. All of the Lorentz transformations in special relativity are nulled out because you change the structure of space. And that's the key. Those formulas were based on an ether model. And people don't want to admit that, but that's how they were created. That's how they were derived, using an ether model.
Now, how would you use the slip wave for like planetary defense?
Boy, lots of ways. Drones.
I'll just throw one out there, you know.
I mean, yeah, of course you'll have a space force if you want to. You can mount these things with lasers. That would be effective sub-light battle arrangement. My ideas in the book really didn't deal with like defending, battling aliens or whatever, but how to protect against asteroids and meteors and comets. You could build drones. They can go out into outer space, land on the object that's coming at us, and just push it away. You know, you could send thousands of them, and they'll all land on the surface and then push the thing off course so it doesn't hurt the Earth. That's, of course, one thing that we can do. And then, like you talked about Project Sunshade on Facebook, we can assemble, and I would be willing to bet there's a lot of other, when we get to other planets and we can get close to them and see, a lot of them do this. They build a sunshade because at some point in their evolution, their sun is they all always burn hotter. And it's going to happen to our sun. It's already happening, very small degrees. It's burning hotter. And what you got to do is cut the incoming energy and so you can modify the weather, keep it cool, you know, and so building drones that can assemble this in outer space would be another great use for the slip wave, because getting rockets and putting them up there would cost all the money that we have in the world, and it would be enormously expensive. But something that could just float up and back without having, use rockets is cost effective beyond belief. And so this thing could be assembled, I don't know how many years it would take, but sooner or later, if we want to keep living on this planet, we'll have to build the sunshade.
Now with Project Sunshade, it's a hard one to say, Sunshade, that's going to keep the Earth cooler, would that also affect like the intensity of the hurricanes? Because that's
probably not as often.
Well, when I lived in Arizona, that's how we got our rain in the summer, was through the monsoon season, with those really intense storms.
You could moderate them so they don't get really intense. Certainly, what you do is put I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 million square miles of sunshade over the part of the ocean where they call Hurricane Alley. Mm-hmm. And so as they come off Africa into the ocean, you shade that area. You block the sunlight from hitting it. See, hurricanes are driven by heat, by the solar energy. You take that away, and they go from being a low pressure to eventually, the pressure rises into a high pressure, and they'll just not develop. So they can come across in rain, but you can dampen. You don't have to kill them all the way, but you can dampen them and moderate those hurricanes and save lives and save tremendous amounts of property damage.
But that would change the oceans too, right? If you cool the water so the hurricanes are weaker.
Yeah, you'll cool the water. You want to cool the water and you want to cool the air. Okay. But definitely both. Just a few degrees difference will make a heck of a difference in hurricane season. We're talking about weather control, climate control. I think that's what advanced species do. It's part of the domestication of our world. We're going to do that eventually.
Yeah, I know that.
Many years to come. I think that will be what happens.
Yeah, let's just not blow ourselves up in the process.
Yeah.
I know.
That's what we've been doing so far.
I know. We have.
We act very primitively. and we don't seem to learn our lesson with that.
This is
you
true.
know?
This is true. We tend to forget from one generation to the next, and everything gets politicized, and I don't even want to get into that. So,
Oh God.
yeah, it becomes a mess. But we have a lot of questions from the chat. I want to let you guys know that we have not forgotten about your questions from down there. We'll get to those in a moment. But I kind of want to switch gears for a second here and ask Mark about how all this interacts with. Our idea of time is just a term that we use. In my opinion, time doesn't really exist. It's just kind of a descriptive term for how we describe our reality. So how does all of this unified field theory, relativity, how does all that work with our concepts of time, and can we use it for some sort of time travel?
And time travel is only possible because of one very important thing: time. If you go outside of time, if you go into the afterlife, they're outside of time, and you can look at it as a whole. You'll find that, or what they have found, what I've heard from NDEs and so forth, is that time is happening all at once.
Right.
Talking at the super universal level, and so since that is true, then you could do, in theory, time travel, but you have to use the portal system or the Stargate to make those jumps. So what you do is you tune space using their technology, which I described briefly in the book, to actually tune into, like a radio, to another time or another dimension or another area in the universe, and you tune space by bombarding it around the frame. There's a signal coming out that's going beyond the speed of light. And when I started to write that chapter, I wasn't sure how I was going to design it, but the one thing I knew for sure is that technology is going to have to accelerate particles beyond the speed of light, or it wouldn't work. And I started doing my research to find if that was possible. And believe it or not, it's been done.
Oh, fantastic.
And, so I had special help there and using keywords to find that technology. And when I found it, I became very excited because, holy cow, you really can build a Stargate. And but then I became concerned because I really don't like going back in time. I don't like messing with things that have already happened. I have problems with that morally, spiritually, and
it can get messy.
Yeah, and but you can do it because all of time is occurring at the same moment.
Right, and it's a matter of
it's eternal.
It's a matter of trying to access those moments.
I think the technology designing that would be incredibly fun. To have a computer simulator that says, if we do this, we input these waveforms at these frequencies, we do all these things, we're going to be able to go back 50 years. I would love to be able to.
Do we have to use technology, or can we just use consciousness, or do you think maybe it'll end up being some sort of combination of both?
I believe that you could do it either way, but you have to be an advanced species with really incredibly powerful minds, like some of our alien friends,
You think they're already doing this?
Well, I think one of the tips that you'll see, there's a green mist seen in some of our earlier experiments, like the Philadelphia experiment. That seems to be a tip-off of people that accidentally or deliberately create time machines or interdimensional portal machines. For some reason, there's this refraction of light or something of that nature, and a misting of the air that causes like a green fog. I've even read about certain spaceships just appearing, and there's this gray cloud or mist, and then they come into view. So yeah, I would bet the more advanced species out there, the ones that are several million years ahead of us, do travel in that way as well.
Okay,
It's probably very common.
Right. If all time exists right now, the past and the future, I think you called them time segments last time.
Right.
Okay, you don't want to go to the past time segment. But if you went to the future time segment, wouldn't that be our future's past? And so we're still messing with it.
Well, the future is tricky. It's much trickier than the past, in that the past is like something that's kind of solidified. The future is in motion all the time. Each moment as we speak, it's changing.
Okay, but what if the future has already happened and we're in the past right now, reliving this
future,
moment?
you can look at it. Here's where quantum mechanics might come in handy. There's
Okay.
a probability function that the further out you go from this present moment into the future, the more tricky and unreliable the prediction would be. But I'm only going, the whole time travel and predicting the future to me has always been very confusing, and it challenges my mind in a way that makes it circular, the thoughts, and almost dizzying, because I know that we have free will and choice. And so that helps determine, our choices help determine the future every second, everywhere in the world. So a little change here or a piece of information here can change things like that. We won't know it, but it'll change it. So if we go into the future, what you do is you collapse that future wave function, and you'll go into one, the strongest possibility. And then that will kind of make it the future, then kind of solidify things. But it gets very tricky, paradoxical. I don't pretend to understand all the nuances of that time travel, because I think it's a fairly complex system.
Yeah,
But
it's this
certainly
where
on
we
the
start
other
getting the
side-
idea of parallel universes. As we start making these decisions, which changes the future, and even Yoda said the future is always in motion. But is this where we start getting the idea of parallel universes with these different decisions being made, and now we have a different future?
I believe that there are parallel universes, but not in the way quantum mechanics puts it, whereas there's a new universe created every time a particle turns left or right. Now,
yeah, I even have a problem with that. Just the idea that every decision that's made creates a different universe. It's like, okay, I'm about to drop this pencil. I made a decision. Now there's a whole new universe created.
It explains the Chris Pine Star Trek movies. I mean, that's the only way you can explain them.
Yeah, there's
because,
that.
Well, there are definitely an infinite amount of universes. I've read many, and I've seen many interviews with NDEs, and God on multiple occasions explains to him, I've created all the universes, all of them, and there's an infinite number and more being created all the time. Dimensions. Trying to understand the infinite is very difficult.
Yeah.
And I stopped myself after a while, because, you just you're just gazing into the horizon, trying to see something that's not really seeable.
Yeah, you're not going out, you're going in,
It's fun to think about and talk about, and I'm sure that we have this Stargate technology. The United States has it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you think every time we open up a Stargate, James Spader appears? A girl can dream. Okay.
Right.
I'm done.
Nicole and I were just watching that movie the other week. And
That's a great movie.
And she says down in the chat, with the Chris Pine comment a moment ago, Chris Pine needs no explanation. But we have a bunch of questions
Some
here.
things don't.
Right. We have a bunch of questions here from the chat. I do want to get to these now. From Sarah Youssef, she asks, what does this theory mean for interdimensional space in terms of other paranormal realms, such as realms of the unseen or astral space?
Well, fortunately, all the other dimensions, they're all in parallel with us, sort of. They're not above us or below us. They're coexisting, like in a dimensions going kind of inward and parallel to us. And fortunately, normally, unless you have one of these Stargate things, they don't interfere. They don't interact in any way. If they did, then there would be total chaos. Things would be popping in and out of
Wait,
space.
I thought we needed chaos.
The Stargate allows you to, in a fairly controlled manner, go to one if you know what you're doing and you have the right technology and you've implemented it properly and whatever, allows you to interface or go to one other area and explore it. But all the astral stuff and all these other spiritual higher dimensions, those aren't really physical. There's dimensions here that aren't physical, but what we have to understand is our physical one that has, mass and energy and all these things was created by a non-physical being, a being of pure consciousness. And I'm trying to speak in a humble manner, because how can we, while we're here in this finite and limited universe, try to describe a being that has infinite knowledge and power and capabilities and can create universes like that? And it's difficult, but there are dimensions that are purely spiritual, levels that you can go up that really don't involve physical interfaces and stuff. And I'm still seeking knowledge and answers about, well, what are these dimensions like heaven where people live in the afterlife? They're not made of any material substance. They seem to be made of pure consciousness. And somehow that becomes more real than here. And they've said that over and over again. So whatever's out there in those other planes is actually more real than this stuff, because the thing that created this world is from a much higher dimension, which is basically not something that's physical. So it's kind of interesting to think about and try to get your mind wrapped around how something non-physical, and I hate to say the words something from nothing, but it's not really nothing. It's a nothing. It's a something that we don't understand physically, but it is a something. So it's not really. This universe was not created from nothing. It was created from a being that is not physical, but
right.
It's pretty hard, heavy stuff.
It gets deep for sure, and we definitely appreciate your insight on this show, because there's a lot here to cover, which is why we brought you back. So another question here. This is from Hell 5309. Says, I was taught that the ether was a concept developed to explain how EM waves could propagate through space. Are you trying to say that the ether is space-time?
Space-time, Einstein really went into it. And at the end, let's just say what he said from his famous speech in 1920 at Leiden University, The Ether and General Relativity. In the last paragraph, he says, recapitulating, we may say that according to the general theory of relativity, space is endowed with physical qualities. In this sense, therefore, there exists an ether. According to general relativity, space without an ether is unthinkable. For in such space, there not only would be no propagation of light, but also no possibility of existence for standards of space and time, measuring rods and clocks, nor therefore any space-time intervals in a physical sense. So he said this on this day. He made that speech to honor his great friend Lorenz, Hendrik Lorenz. And but nobody really listened. He made that speech. It was a profound, deeply important metaphysical speech, and it just drifted off into the ethers of history. And
was it kind of just over their heads?
Never really thought about anymore, never really discussed after that. But he's basically saying general relativity proves there's a physical substance out there that's being bent. You can't bend something that's not there. It doesn't exist. It can't be bent. So that whole idea that many physicists have today that space is a vacuum void made of nothing, and there's a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them that go that route, it doesn't make sense.
Well,
Not
isn't
with
that where dark matter comes into play? That kind of explanation for what's in between that we can't quite explain?
Dark matter is a very confusing subject, and nobody knows quite what it is because
Somewhere in
it's
the
dark.
ether.
Yeah, touche.
Ether.
There is definitely more matter because they detected that the calculations for the spin of our galaxy indicate there's more matter than we can see. Oh, okay, that's fine. And in my theory, that's very explainable. And so now I'm going to make an announcement that's going to help clear up the dark matter problem. Basically, there's loads of neutronium cores, which are basically invisible. And those neutronium cores are what's used to form stars. So I'm saying our sun has a solid neutronium core. And to back that up, there's plenty of evidence out there. Every time we watch a supernova blow or something similar to that, always what's left behind? A neutron star or a black hole. So what I'm saying is it's always a neutron star. Black holes are just incredibly dense neutronium material. And where did all that neutronium come from? It came from the Big Bang, because that big cosmic ape was one humongous piece of solid neutronium that had a critical mass that caused it to blow apart again. And I figured all this out because I studied the neutron, and there's some really odd things about the neutron. And I got suspicious when I saw these things, and I said, this is intelligent design. There's no reason for the neutron to act like it does unless somebody thought about it and said it needs to work this way. And what I'm talking about, if you take a proton and you put it into outer space, it will stay there for billions of years and not change. But if you take a neutron, one single neutron isolated, and you let it sit there, in 15 minutes, it turns into a proton and an electron. Well, that's pretty handy because that's hydrogen. And that's exactly what we need to build stars. So the fuel that came about from, most logically, a humongous neutronium explosion that released enormous amounts of free neutrons. Within 15 minutes, we had humongous amounts of hydrogen available. But not only did that happen, the neutronium, it didn't all vaporize into a plasma. Many spheres of neutronium came out from this thing, and those formed the seeds for galaxies and stars and even planets. I suspect that our planet has a small neutronium rapidly spinning core. And so I did research for that. I says, if that's true, there's fusion going on inside of the Earth. And that would explain why we have all the elements right here on Earth. They certainly didn't randomly fall from meteors and just collect. That's too hard of a thing to happen. We have all the elements. Something made those elements, and it made it right here. And the only way that could happen is if we had a fusion reactor inside of the Earth. And so I started searching for neutrinos coming out of the Earth. And I found a Japanese scientist who turned the antennas toward the center of the Earth, and they found neutrinos coming from the center of the Earth, which shouldn't be happening unless there's either a fission reaction or a fusion reaction. So there is some evidence suggesting what I'm saying is true. So the whole universe is really based on neutron theory, neutronium theory, that everything we have today comes about because of the neutron, the existence of the neutron, which is a very, very well-designed object.
Well, that seems to get even deeper when we start, and people make the offhand comment sometimes that we're all stardust, but that kind of like really hits it really hits it home there. If everything was originally just one big Neutron. Wow.
Yeah, and it's cyclical. What
Yeah.
triggers it again? When it all collapses, you reach a critical
Right.
mass, which I call the Fiore threshold, and it blows all over again.
Yeah. So there's that
eternal.
idea that this universe, what was before the universe? The universe.
Different universe.
Just a different
Yeah.
universe, right?
It is now an eternal object.
Yeah.
There may have been a beginning, but if that beginning happened, what happened was all the positrons and electrons were crushed into neutrons. And why do I say that? The physicists are going to argue again. But inside of the neutron and proton are thirds of electrons and positrons. That's no coincidence. If you smash an electron and a positron, you get quarks. Now, the physicists would argue, oh, no, that's an excitation. Stop. It's quarks. You just cause the electron and the positron to shatter into the basic components that make up neutrons and protons. So really, the universe comes down to being just two things, electrons and positrons. So at the very beginning of the first cycle, that's what I say, all that was existing. And from that, God crushed things into the neutron cosmic egg, and kaboom, it explodes. And then from there on after, it just happens
Goes to the whole
over
thing
and
again.
over again.
Yep. Well,
It's a perfect design.
Yeah. Well,
Then
we are
God created it.
Well, Mark, we are at the end of our show. We just got a minute or two here to wrap up. Where can everybody find your book, Master of Reality?
Well, it's on my website, www.super-relativity.com. There's links on the very first page right at the top to go to. You could get it and go to Amazon directly and order either the ebook or the regular paperback. Or right now, I'm still offering a signed version, unless it gets too hectic.
Yeah.
Yes, you got one.
I actually have one too. Yep.
Yeah, I did the whole time. So it's a very official. I'm thinking ahead here. Someday this book is going to be proven correct, or what's in this book. And those books I think, are going to be very, very valuable.
See how the spine
There
is
you
still
go.
nice and new. I read it very gingerly.
So Nicole's put the link to the website down in the chat. Also, for those watching on YouTube, the link to the website and the book are both down in the description, so you can find that information there as well. And then for those listening to the podcast later, it's super-relativity.com. So, Mark, thank you very much for coming back and explaining more of this extremely fascinating information with us. And it seems like we've still just scratched the surface, that there's so much here.
Yeah, I know. It's fun to talk about all these things because it's a new horizon that we can all share together. We wake up and discover anti-gravity.
That would be amazing. And one day we will.
I want to apologize for the mix-up going in. I didn't have the link and I didn't know what to do. But
that's okay. There was just some miscommunication before the show. But yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Victoria tell you it's Mercury retrograde.
Yep.
So, all right, Mark, you have a great evening, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Okay.
Mark.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So I guess you blew my hollow Earth theory there, huh?
Yeah. See, if we actually have, pretty much, he was saying like there's a star inside of our the Earth's core. That would kind of.
There's a star in all of us.
There you go. Well, we're all made of stardust, which is extremely true. Mm-hmm. So, all right, that's Mark Fiorentino. We appreciate him coming back. He was on back in September, so if you missed that, go back and watch it. It's kind of like the primer for this episode. Hey, seriously, because he got to just like straight up unified field theory for that episode, which is really kind of a preview for all the different details we got into this for this one. So
it's Mark Volume 1.
Mark Volume 1. This was Mark Volume 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still have more questions I didn't get to, but that's okay.
Well, we'll just have to have him back. Yeah.
We're Facebook friends, I'll ask.
There you go. All right. All right. So now we have to get into the sad stuff. I found out I had that show with Sam Baltrusis and Joni Mayhan earlier this evening. I was messaged during the show, and I didn't see it until a while afterward, probably about a half hour before Victoria and I connected for this, that our good friend and supporter, everybody's friend, Tim Shone, had passed away. He'd been battling, really a couple different illnesses here. He basically had double pneumonia, some other different things going on, and then 3 days ago was diagnosed with COVID, and it's just that many things compounding. It's just
too much.
It's too much. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've seen me drinking throughout. I am drinking Haunted Road Roast in Tim's honor. Haunted Road Roast helps you ghosts. And I always did that for Tim. So he was, he was an amazing guy. He had a heart of gold, and anything and everything to do with the paranormal, he was extremely interested in. He shared out everybody's stuff. He bought everybody's book, even though he did not have a lot of money, but he would go out and he would buy everybody's book. He was extremely supportive of everybody. He'd share everybody's stuff out. He'd jump on everybody's thread and talk about everything to do with the paranormal. He just, he had a huge, huge heart. And so it's just heartbreaking to hear him pass, because he was a young guy, It's just tragic to hear.
He would always send me bad dad jokes. It's like, oh God, Tim, now what? Just the worst jokes. But
yeah, that was Tim for you. And then whenever he'd make it out to an event, which he could only get to a couple. I know some people were trying to get him out there out east earlier this year, and all that fell through. But that was just great how the community was coming together to, kind of rally behind, somebody that always supported them. It's like, let's get Tim out to one of these events. And so, the guys are setting that up. That was awesome of you guys to do that. And I know everything fell through. It's kind of the world today, but he will sorely be missed, because he was just, it was Tim. It's been a tough year for those in the paranormal. I've seen some postings lately of other people that have passed here, and some that I didn't know of. But like Roland Gerodius last summer, we lost. Mike Stevenson here a couple months ago. For those of you that knew him, and now Tim Shone. These the guys that I was fairly close to over the years. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. So, I see some comments down there in the chat. I know Victoria, when you hadn't heard when I told you.
No, thanks, Mike.
Yeah, it's just.
Yeah.
So, and I know there were some people that came out specifically for the show tonight, and they're down there. Tim was an amazing friend and colleague from Joker BTA. He's absolutely could be missed. And I know my phone's been blowing up throughout the show. So it seems like Tim Fundraiser is the name of the group. And so, I guess people are going to be putting something together for him. So we'll definitely jump on that and do something for Tim.
So who do you think he's going to haunt first?
Well,
he will.
yeah. So I'll say this. So before I found out about this, after I got off the show with Sam and Joni, I went back into the bedroom to chat with Nicole, and we're just sitting there, and the lights start doing some weird things, and so we're kind of wondering, was it just the lights or somebody? Because there are spirits at our house. Not like an extreme haunt or anything here, but there's a farmer and there's a woman. But Nicole was like, well, there's somebody new in the house. Okay. And then I came back out to the living room. I had left my phone in the living room, and I pick it up, and I got a message from somebody whose name I didn't recognize, and it says that Tim had passed. I'm like, what? And so I went to Tim's profile, look up, and yeah, and it's like, so was that? I don't know. But another interesting thing happened during the show above my head about 10 or 15 minutes ago. The light went out up there. Now, this light above my head runs on a battery. It's just a little overhead that I use to kind of, backlight myself during the show. And the battery will last like a good 3 hours. I just took it off the charger before the show, put it up there like I do every single show. It went out after like an hour of usage.
So we know where Tim's at.
So I'm not saying for sure, but it's a possibility he was hanging out watching the show like he did every Tuesday.
Haunted Road
which
Race.
is heartwarming to me.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, he's going to be missed.
He will definitely be missed. Again, he was an amazing support. He had that heart of gold. He wanted to do right by everybody and support everybody. And yeah, we will miss Tim Shone. Absolutely. So, all right, everybody. It's a sad note to end the show off of, but let's get to the shout-outs. All right.
Shout-outs.
Yeah. All right. Let's get to. I want to thank Nicole for moderating the chat this evening. So, again, we're still looking for a chat moderator, and Nicole's been happy to do it the past couple of weeks, but it's not. She has a ton of other things that she's usually doing on Tuesday nights. So, somebody. Let's get to the participants tab. In the participants tab, we have Andy Coco. Thanks for joining us tonight. Donna Liska, thank you as well. Alina the Fam, as always. Empath Medium, thanks for joining us. There's Helen Espinoza. Hell5309, thank you for joining us for your questions tonight. Jill Nimchinsky, thank you as always. Joker BTA, thank you for joining us. Lord Chaotic 0013 as well. Mark Fiorentino was down in the chat earlier. That's how we found out that he needed the link.
Thank goodness for chat.
Thank goodness for chat. Yeah, there's Shirley Burton and Christopher Stanton. Stanton's Journeys is down there. So we'll go ahead and scroll through. I know Adam Tillery was lurking earlier. So thank Adam. And we'll scroll back through here, see if there's, because it never gets everybody. Who did it miss? Yeah, there's Mr. CO2. And there's Tammy Heitzman. Thanks for joining us, as always. And there's Sean Gilmore. Great to see you out here tonight, Sean. Eva Gellert, thanks for joining us tonight. And I think that's going to be scroll back down to the bottom here. All right, everybody. That will do it. So appreciate everybody joining us for tonight. Mark's down there in the chat still answering questions. Thanks, Mark, for doing that. And definitely check out his book, Master of Reality. A lot of fantastic information in here. So
it's really easy to read, even though it's a complex subject. I mean, it's just the way he writes it. It's so, that's what he means.
Yeah. Does a great job. He tries to, detail everything, give you all the information that you need, but in not a way that's going to be difficult to understand. So thank you, Mark.
Yeah, I have to stop and think a lot. Like, okay, yeah, I agree with that. Okay, moving on.
So, and Janet Simmons down in the chat. Thank you, Janet. Appreciate that. All right, everybody. You have a great evening. We'll catch you back here same time next week. And for those that are a part of the Connected Universe Portal website, you have access to the Beyond the Shadows live stream. We have a private group that we broadcast that on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. So join us tomorrow for that. The link is in the portal, so you can get it there. And if you did sign up for it, you should already have gotten an invitation to that group on Facebook, so you can watch it tomorrow at 8 p.m. Beyond the Shadows. So, all right, everybody. Exciting stuff.
Yes. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's a good time.
It is. It's the second best week.
Second best night.
Second best hour of the week.
All right.
Something like that.
Because this was the best hour.
Best hour, right.
All right.
It's the best hour 2.0. That's it.
Okay.
Best hour 2.0.
All right. I'll give you that.
It's been a rough day.
A little bit. Yes. Yes. Quite a bit. So, okay.
Yeah.
Have a great night.
Okay.
Till next time.
Bye. Bye.